Welcome to Dr. B Music Theory. Tanish Pruthi commented on my video Dr. B Music Theory Lesson 21, which was about melody harmonization. He writes, really love the video. Keep it up, man. But then what about harmonic rhythm? Any video in which you have mentioned about it? Only briefly. I've only talked about harmonic rhythm very superficially. So let's change that right now. Let's talk about harmonic rhythm. So harmonic rhythm, just to define, is the rhythm at which the chords change. How frequently do the chord changes? Are they changing every beat, every 2 beats, every measure, every 4 measures? How long? How long does a typical harmony last? There might be all sorts of different rhythms in the melody that go on top of that harmony, but harmonic rhythm, the speed at which the chords change. Well, let's look historically first. So in the Baroque era, for certain types of music, like a chorale, very often the harmony would change every 1 or 2 beats. Sometimes it would be longer, but sometimes it would be faster. Sometimes it would even be the 8th note. But in general, the chords change every beat or every other beat. And so when you're studying music theory, much of the stuff that I've talked about is starting and looking at the Baroque era, specifically Johann Sebastian Bach. Chorales are a foundational piece of study. A lot of that information is being derived from that. So it's not infrequent that you will start with harmonic rhythm being every 1 to 2 beats. So what would that mean? And why is it important? Well, one is the relationship of harmonic rhythm to the meter of the piece. And there's so many factors. That's one of them. The other is just what emotional effect harmonic rhythm, what it does, because it's different and it allows different things to happen to the music. If you have a harmonic rhythm that's quick, meaning changing very frequently, like every 1 or 2 beats, or a harmonic rhythm that is much slower. So relationship to meter. If we are in 4/4 and our harmonic rhythm is every quarter note, so we're expecting chord, 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 etc., etc. What you want is the goal-directed nature of harmonic progression to usually reinforce the meter. Let me say that again, because that's pretty complicated. You want the goal-oriented nature of harmonic progression to reinforce the meter. So in meter, in 4/4, beat 1 is your strongest beat. That's how it becomes a meter of 4. Beat 3 is your second strongest. And then beats 2 and 4 are your weak beats. And you have that metric structure. So you do not want harmony to detract from that. You want your harmony to feel like beat 1 is still the most accented. Now, how can harmony influence that? That's a really critical question. Well, if I put a 5 chord here, let's say I put a 5 chord here, I turn it to a 5/7 chord here, bar line, I'm coming up to beat 1, that's my strongest. I know harmonically, again, as I said, that goal-oriented nature of harmonic progression, I know harmonically that this 5 chord is going to probably want to go to a 1 chord. That's the number one expectation. And here I have a beat 1 coming up, which is the most accented. So if I combine those two things, the expectation of the harmonic progression with the expectation of the accented beat, and resolve to beat one on, resolve to a one chord on beat one, everything feels right in the world. Everything is coming together, it's reinforcing it. So if we just think, let's say maybe we went one chord, four chord, 5, 5, 7, 1. And I go, first I have to get the rhythm, the meter in your head for a little bit, so let me go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. That feels like it makes sense. It's gonna work. Now, let me do that one more time, and I won't count as I play, but we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And I just held that. Now imagine, if you will, that instead of going to 5, we have our 5, 7, and instead of going to 1, I stay on 5, 7 for another beat. And then I go to 1 here, on beat 2. That's going to feel very strange. That's going to mean that the harmonic motion, and in this case, again, I said 1 to 2 beats, but here we're all the way up to 3 beats now, which for 1 is an odd number. It's like I'm extending it. So there's a little bit of expectation. Once you've established a harmonic rhythm, you expect it to stay at that harmonic rhythm. Or if it changes, you expect it to change at something that's divisible by 2. You don't expect, if you're going 1 beat or 2 beats, the next after that would be 4 beats, and then 6 beats, and then 8 beats. You do not expect something to all of a sudden be going to 3, 5, or 7 beats in length for a harmonic rhythm, for a chord to last 3, 5, or 7 beats. Those are odd numbers and do not feel, they feel odd, hence the term. So 1, in this example, what I'm putting here, where we have our 5 chord start on beat 3, turns into a 5, 7, stays a 5, 7 on beat 1. 1, its first unexpected thing is it's 3 beats in length. Totally strange. And then it resolves on beat 2, which is not our that's a weak beat. But when we resolve to 1, that is an accent harmonically. It's the equivalent to an accent harmonically. So if you hear that, 1, 2, 3, 4. All of a sudden we lose the sense of meter. Even if we had a drum, timpani or something hitting beat 1, the harmony is at odds with the meter. So that's one other thing to keep in mind for harmonic rhythm. Even if I took away the 3 beats thing, which is unusual. You know, let's say I went a 1 chord, 1, 6, so still and then I went to 4 here, 5, 7, you know. Even if we went 1 chord on beat 1, 1, 6 on beat 2, 4 chord on beat 3, 5, 7 on 4, stayed 5, 7, or maybe the 5 to 5, 7 here over the bar line. This is why when you're composing music, you normally do not want your chord progression to have a chord that goes across the bar line, unless you've started it and you're really extending it. But in this, when your expectation is chord, 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 every 1 or 2 beats, to then have what would almost be considered a hemiola, especially if you were to keep that going. Hemiola is usually a syncopated passage that gets repeated. You have to be very careful with how that harmonic rhythm. You have to consider that resolving to tonic is an accent, that the 5 chord is almost like the question and the 1 is the answer. So where those chords get placed So not only the harmonic rhythm, but their placement. So harmonic rhythm in terms of placement in meter is another important concept. Now let's quickly talk about what happens in the classical era, where all of a sudden the harmonic rhythm slowed down significantly. It tends to be one chord for an entire measure, or sometimes two measures, sometimes even longer than that. You still set up a set of expectations. And music is so much about expectations. Harmonically, in terms of the sounds, the intervals, resolutions, as well as rhythm. If I set up an expectation of loud, soft, 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 loud, soft, 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 loud, soft, 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 and then I break that, that's going to be unexpected. That's going to be surprising. And the same is true as if I change chords. If I change chords every measure, I set up an expectation. And when I go against that expectation, as a composer, I have to be aware of that. As you are analyzing pieces, you should pay close attention to why a composer would have broken expectations. What is the effect they're going for? Because it's going to have an effect. And you need to be conscious of that effect. Is it that the piece of music is trying to generate more tension, more excitement, something of that nature, and so they set up your expectations and then they deny them for a while, and then when they finally come back to what you would expect, you have a greater sense of resolution. That's very common, quite possible. So by establishing a harmonic rhythm, and it doesn't matter what that expectation is, as long as it's an expectation, you can then, as a composer, performer, you can play with those expectations, the expectations of the listener. In classical music, when you have these longer measures, or slower harmonic rhythm, I should say, the chords last for a longer number of measures. What that allowed is a focus on melody to an extent that hadn't been quite the same in the Baroque era. So the attention of the listener isn't necessarily on, oh, here's a chord change, another chord change, another chord change, another harmonic change. It's, oh, here's this bass, and we have a melody that goes on top of that. That said, there's still a very specific harmonic rhythm that sets up a set of expectations, and you want to make sure that you're aware of those expectations both in terms of the time and their relationship to the strong and weak beats in a meter. The last aspect to really give some consideration to is the emotional effect of different harmonic rhythms. So, Baroque music, where you have a very harmonic rhythm is relatively quick, feels different than classical music, where the harmonic rhythm is comparatively much slower. Both of them are using similar harmonic progressions, this kind of goal-oriented of start with tonic, sense of relaxation, go somewhere else, end up at a dominant where you have tension, and then resolve it back to tonic. The quicker harmonic rhythms have a certain tension and muscularness to them. At least that's the way I interpret it. When I listen to Bach's music and the chord changes, it just feels like there's a certain tension because your ear's constantly having to process that information, that harmonic change, the relationship. This happens all at a subconscious level, but your ear does it anyways. It's automatic. Whereas when things move at a slower pace, like in classical music, your ear doesn't have to process that. It says, oh, got it. And it can kind of go on autopilot and pay attention to other things. So there's definitely an emotional difference. And if we translate that over into jazz, and we look at, let's say we compare a George Gershwin song, a standard, where the chords would change every 2 to 4 beats, maybe even slower at certain spots. We compare that with John Coltrane, Giant Steps, where it's it's actually, I would say Gershwin tends to be sometimes every 2 to 4 beats, but more often 4 beats would be probably your average, sometimes longer. Coltrane was with like giant steps, was every 2 beats. And then you do Miles Davis, like So What, and it's every 8 measures. Yes, there's they do some substitute stuff within that, that's fine. But these are 2 very different feelings. You listen to a jazz standard by Gershwin, something like But Not For Me. You listen to Coltrane, giant steps, then you listen to Miles Davis, So What. Harmonic rhythm is one of the musical characteristics that affect the emotion you get from those songs. So that's just scratching the surface on what harmonic rhythm is, how it works, and just some things for you to consider as you are composing, arranging, or analyzing some music.